Thanks everybody for coming out. Full house, much appreciated. Can I see by a show of hands who's sort of at what level, or is everybody in here in design? That's maybe the first question. Mostly design. Anybody not in design? Okay. And freshmen, sophomores, okay, juniors, and seniors? What's up, seniors? All right, just saw you guys. Okay, so my name is Gamal Prather. My brand is called The Original Article for Design anyways, and these are my ideas about design. So we're going to talk about these four things, four Ps very conveniently, and we'll see who knows what the last one is when we get there. So the three things that I do primarily are the original article, which is a design brand, and then I do the Instead company as well, and that's a vegan food brand that I started. And GML is a lyrics, spoken word, rhyme related music thing. So, okay, how did I get here? I would say it took me a really long time to tell people confidently that I am an artist. And that's because I think for a long time I felt like I had to do just one thing. But over time, talking to lots of friends, consultants even, it occurred to me that I could do multiple things at one time, and that would be actually my unique, and those particular things would make the uniqueness that is me. So, but it really took me a long time to get there, and I was really kind of twisted up about which one of these things I was going to have to pick or take seriously, I guess. And what I realized in working with a friend of mine and talking about a lot of this stuff, that the through line or the vector for all this is wellness. And I definitely could not have said that at the beginning of my career, which is about 14, 15 years ago. But now I feel like that is objectively the thing that I'm trying to do with all the creating that I'm doing. So, so how did I get here? It's largely because of what my mom taught me, and she's sitting back over there, so if we could give her a quick round of applause for being awesome. Yeah. Moms. So, and I realized just now that I forgot to put in two really critical pictures, but one is of me being about 3 feet tall and like baking something, and there's another great one of me like raking leaves and stuff around that, you know, just doing lots of those kinds of things, because that was what she always had me doing, was, you know, basically being useful. And what that taught me was to try when I didn't exactly know that something was going to work. Taught me to ask questions. And because of those two things in particular, and also that's the story I like to tell, is that I used to live in New Jersey when I was a kid, and we didn't have a tree low enough for a tree house. So we used to drive out and we'd see these sort of playhouse things, and you know, they cost a bunch of money. And so she's like, well, I think we can make those. I think we can make that. It's just wood and like tarps and stuff. And so we did, but it wasn't like we had like some full-on wood shop to do that. We had a circular saw turned upside down on 2x4s on sawhorses. So it was a pretty lo-fi type of shop that we were working out of, but we totally got it done. And I think experiences like that, and there are just countless of those from my childhood, where we just kind of made something. That's, I think, very much how I got to being an engineer, and then later a designer, and now an artist. So the loose chronology is kind of in 2 phases, maybe 3. So got through all that making as a kid and bumping around, and went to Florida A&M University, where I studied mechanical engineering. And that experience was fine. I was good at math and science, and I didn't even know at the time that, you know, work could really light you up and turn you on and make you feel good. So I just kind of was going through that process, and I was I think it was between my sophomore and junior year that I was speaking to a friend of mine, and he told me about industrial design because that's what he was studying at the University of Cincinnati. And he was telling me about his internships, and I told him about mine. And if we had worked at the same company, we basically would have been working side by side, but I wanted to be doing his job, not my job. So I very quickly set about figuring out how I could get a degree in design. And also in that process, I worked at 3M. All my internships were at this corporation up in Minnesota. Learned a lot of engineering stuff, really felt what it was like to be at an engineering company. And Yeah, and all of that went fine. Again, there's nothing where I was like, I hate this, I'm unhappy. It wasn't as loud as that, but it was kind of a feeling. So I decided that I did want to get an industrial design degree based on what my friend Pete was telling me and all the images I could look up on the internet at the time. And I got an internship at Procter & Gamble in between college and grad school because I went straight through. And this was a really nice transition for me because it was a type of department at Procter & Gamble that was mostly doing engineering, but they were engaged with designers in some way. There's one group overseas and another one locally in Cincinnati that we'd get these sketches from that I'd seen photos of. So it was really cool to see a real life sketch, even though I didn't do it. And so that was like, that kind of eased me in, just got me a little bit closer. And then next thing I knew is I was in grad school at the University of Cincinnati, where it was literally my first day where we were in a seminar about sustainability, and I had to ask, what's sustainability? I mean, like, I understand the word generically, but I didn't understand it in the context that most people use it in today. So that was probably my first of too many humbling moments to count when I was in grad school. So, and as another thing I always tell people is that a big aha for me in life is that most skills are learnable, specifically drawing. So I don't know how many of you came into school here able to draw. I went to grad school not able to draw, but just a huge fan of design. And I wrote this, probably 5-page paper about things that I sort of understood about myself, that I knew that I could do this. Things like I could tell you what car it was late at night on the highway by like the headlights or the taillights, that kind of thing. But these were still pretty abstract things to me at the time. So this, actually even back at Florida A&M was where I was first exposed to 3D modeling, and that's definitely another big part of my career. That's a tool that I use all the time, and it's really important to me. So I remember, I was actually just telling Max that I remember we would extrude gearboxes and very rectilinear shapes, and my first question was like, well, how would you make the dashboard of a car? Like, you can't make that with extrusions, right? And of course, no one in an engineering college can answer that question for you, so I was just kind of dumbfounded for a while. And then fast forward, when I was in grad school, I found out what Alias was. So then fast forward to that, so learned a lot about 3D. That was definitely the thing I was best at. I was pretty good at drawing. The engineering background definitely helped me relate to other students in ways that I didn't expect. Like, they were all really, really good at drawing, but I was terrible at drawing. But then when it came time to paint color chips and make gradiated scales and all that kind of stuff, and they had to be like laser precise, trimmed and cut, I was really good at that stuff, again, because of that lady, and paying attention to what I was doing. But a lot of the younger students weren't so good at that, and theirs looked more like they cut them with a chainsaw and put them up there with like hot glue, like it was just craziness. Much more of an art piece than like something that felt intentional and designerly. So a lot of cool exchanges that helped me out at the time, but I don't think I fully even realized them then. Got this job at a place called Product Ventures in Connecticut, and that was a structural packaging type of job. And we did some other stuff, some electronics, pencil sharpeners, desk type products, the occasional set-top box or cable box, when those were much more prevalent probably than they are now. And I stayed there about 2 years, and it was largely because I was getting a little tired of the job, and it was getting repetitive quickly. And so a friend of mine's girlfriend lived in New York, and I was going to New York with some frequency, and decided I'm going to move to New York, which is a very new thought in my mind. I'd never aspired to live in any type of major city. I should say, when I was younger, probably before design school, I was hyper shy. Just the shyest kid available was me. And I think looking back, I don't think I felt that my opinion mattered that much, and I don't think I understood the world as especially changeable. But that's one of the things that going to grad school and studying design helped me understand, was that this was all just ideas, and is kind of grit and determination, a bit of luck to actually get those things to happen in real life. So then I moved going to Cincinnati, or rather to New York City, I worked at this place called Marchand Eyewear, where I remember very distinctly in that interview, I was thinking to myself, circles and sticks, how hard can it be? Famous last words. So I learned a lot very quickly about doing that that's a very two-dimensional process traditionally. But the license that I was working on was the Nike license, and things were happening at their headquarters where their eyewear design department was basically being dissolved. And so we had to take on a bunch of the 3D work kind of overnight. And I did not know how to do that. But I did love 3D, and so I was up for it. And I spent my time nearly exclusively in Rhino for that job. And I still use Rhino a lot today, but that's really where I started. Completely self-taught. Watched a lot of tutorials, but the internet was still kind of a different animal then, so the amount of content was considerably different than now. So that's kind of how I sort of see phase one. But the big thing for Marchand was that I found out that I really love eyewear. It was a really nice blend of engineering, because we definitely had to get stuff made, but also aesthetics in a very particular way, because when something sits on the human face, it's a bit of a different thing than when it's something that fits in your hand or goes on your foot or anything else. So small moves made a huge difference is what I definitely learned at that job, among many other things like branding and working with team members that had really, really different interests and ideas about really what this process was that we were engaging in. So I learned, I think, a lot about communicating with people with very different ideas about that, so that we could, there's a lot of ego shedding, I would say, at that job. Because I started to realize that this was really about a much bigger thing than just me and what I got to design, but what we could all get done together. I moved to Santa Barbara, California, and got a job at a place called Lifestyle Design. And that was largely motivated by the fact that I thought I was going to be able to learn a lot about Alias. Because as I was getting toward the end of my time at Marchand, I felt like I was kind of running into some roadblocks with Rhino. Not really from an ability standpoint, but really like it felt like the tool was almost kind of too slow for how quickly I was thinking about trying to get something done. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll go back to Alias, because I was pretty all right at that in grad school. Turns out it didn't really work out that way. And I basically did a lot of eyewear there, because they have a lot of eyewear contracts historically. And so that relationship kind of turned sour after a few months. And I ended up finding a business partner there, young entrepreneurial guy that had a big vision for the future, I guess I would say. And we moved to Los Angeles and started something called Atelier Savant. He's French, so that means brilliant workshop in French. And then we worked together for about 2012, probably 3 years or so before that business relationship at least stopped being functional, and I had to go out on my own and just figure it out for myself was what felt like the next recourse. And then that's when I started officially the original article. So that's kind of the quick version of how I got to here. And then how I really got in this room. A friend of mine actually from Marchand went to CSULB and is friends with a lot of the faculty and staff here, and just being in the community, eventually, they asked me to come and speak, and I've helped out at some of the reviews and stuff as well. So, so the first question students usually always ask me is like, well, where do you find clients if you're working by yourself? And the best answer to that is you're never quite sure. I don't know that anybody has everybody has sort of their Rolodex, but I don't think that anybody can just call people up and just get the money and get the project instantly like that. There's a lot of lag time that happens in between, and that's a bit frustrating at first until you start to you can step back far enough and start to see more of the trends and the flows of kind of where things are actually coming from and maybe why that happened. So reflecting on that stuff a lot is how it's gotten more stable in recent times. I think we'll probably come back to the client thing, I'm sure, at some point later, so I'll leave that there for now. Partnerships. I have a slide about that at the end, but I think what I really want to say about that is, again, you can get a lot more done with other people than you can by yourself. And I think that there's a lot of tendency in design to, some schools are way more collaborative than others. Cincinnati was pretty good about that, but I've heard of other schools where people are really keeping their cards close to their chests, and that bums me out. Because again, I think, I just remember the experience of all the undergrads going to their co-ops or their internships and coming back and talking about that and different techniques that they learned and different projects they got to work on. And I think that there is so much richness in those exchanges that I don't know why you wouldn't tell people about stuff that you're working on. And I think a lot of the rapport and such that you build with people in those moments and really throughout your career, those are the lasting things that will at some point probably bring you work and certainly bring you experience, but will definitely bring you work at some point. But it's important to tell people about what you care about. That's one of the biggest things. And I know a lot of design students have some trouble speaking about their designs because, whether that's in critique or to family and friends. I think a lot of that has to do with, we're putting ourselves into these projects in a way that is pretty abstract for people that are studied other disciplines or studying other disciplines. So I don't think there's really anything to be shy about. I think if I've learned anything, there's a lot of emotional work that I think everybody has to do, but it's really important to feel confident, to over time develop confidence about what you're doing. Because I think, and that shows through in how you present it and how you speak to people and their response to it. It's not like like in a store where you don't have anybody telling you anything and you just have to make the decision based on what you know. You have to foster, you can foster that. So that's all I'll say about that for now. So going to the principles section. So these are probably some of the biggest gems I've realized in thinking about career stuff. The only rule is to provide value. That's all that matters. And something my old business partner and I used to say to clients all the time as we were talking about money and negotiating was, price is what you pay and value is what you get. So, and everybody has a different sort of like metric of what those things are and what's acceptable to them or not. And it's, again, because we're putting so much of our person into this, it's really easy and pretty natural to take feedback or a client's rebuff of a proposal personally. So don't do that. It's not about you. It's so rarely about you as a person. It may be about, something you said or something you proposed, but it's not about you. Those are separate things. Even though you're putting yourself into those things, they are separate things. So if you're ever in that situation of really feeling bad about either a critique you went through, you have to just start now separating yourself from that. Because they're not talking about you as a human. They're just talking about not even all your work. They're talking about this one piece of work. So be easy to work with. And this also cultivated over time. It's a practice of just seeing how people react to things you say and how you say them. I was telling Max earlier, or maybe it was the seniors I was telling you earlier, I had a reputation, I guess you could say, certainly at the first place I worked at, for being a bit gruff, harsh, because I was looking at things in a fairly myopic way and not really appreciating the wholeness of what we were doing or all the people that were involved or other people's work that went into it. So two of the things that I think help ease of working with people are boundaries and transparency. So people are going to take as much as you give them, or they'll probably take more than you give them. So it's important to set up boundaries. And again, most of what I'm saying is in the context of my modern times of working independently. So you have to set up boundaries with your clients or with whoever you're working with so that they understand roles and responsibilities, how much things cost. And the great thing is that once you do that, and it's a little scary to do that stuff at first, but you just steadily do it. You have to do it. You won't not have to do it if you're working independently. So if that's something you're interested in now or in the future, just get comfortable with the idea that that's something you're going to have to do. Sometimes you have to tell people no, which can feel really weird. Or I've told many clients that, I have something about negotiation in a few slides, but basically, if you think that what we've talked about costs this much, then you should find I can refer you to some students that I know or just other friends of mine that might be open to it. But for me, it just doesn't work. So once I started to frame that in terms of a fit in the way that like if, oh, I don't really fit into this office, just sort of doesn't feel right. It's the same kind of thing where like they just want to pay something different than what I need. Not like I want to charge, I need to charge so that I don't run out of money, or I can pay my rent and buy food and those kinds of things. So there's no time where you should really feel badly about charging someone for your work. And I know I wrestled with that for quite a long time, that I might be charging somebody $10,000 for something or $50,000 for something. Those are way bigger numbers than I had ever had in a bank account. So it's scary like that. And it's not even like the success of, like, it's not like success is necessarily scary, but sometimes it just feels like this very delicate, like crystal egg or something, like if I drop it, like I'll never get it back kind of thing. But I don't think that that's true. So the other thing is transparency. So great example. If you make a mistake, cop to it. It's almost certainly not the end of the world. Recently, working on this helmet project that I was on, I objectively overstepped. Now, asterisk, that's because I felt like someone else on the team wasn't getting something done quickly enough. However, formally, I should not have done that. We had a conversation. We hung up abruptly, called each other back because it got heated kind of quickly. And it wasn't that I was offended by what his message was. I was offended by the way he said it to me, because it was pretty patronizing and pretty rude. So I think even if someone does something to upset you, there's still not a reason to be rude or unkind to someone. So that was my lasting takeaway from that exchange. And I sent an email to the whole team, like, here's where I messed up. I won't do this again. I didn't even go into, this wasn't happening fast enough. Not important. What's important is that they understood that I understood what my role was, and that I was just trying to get something done. That's all. So nothing about trying to leap over somebody else's position or something like that. And it's oddly freeing. Like, it doesn't feel great to admit that you made a mistake, but it is oddly freeing in a way, because now there's nothing to hide at that point. And it can be an awful lot of work to try to hide a mistake, whether that's in a 3D model or in a human interaction. It's really hard to hide those mistakes over the long term. And it's way easier to address the mistake and make a correction and move forward. So, yeah. Establish your process. Again, the luxury that I have of working independently is that I can mostly dictate how we're going to work. A lot of times clients may have an established process. And in my case, more often they don't, because they're entrepreneurs or they're starting their business, or may have a business, but they've never made a product like this before. So they don't quite understand anything about the molding process or working with a factory and what those lead times are about. So it's really important to try to set that up again early on, so that it's not something you have to revisit and that will screw you up later on, especially from a timeline standpoint. A key part of that, of establishing the process, is helping a client understand that I'm not just going to be telling you a bunch of stuff and I'm the super important designer with thick black glasses and just do what I say. I really want them to be a part of it. I mean, the reason why we're in the room together is because I know some stuff probably that they don't, and they have experience or knowledge or an infrastructure that I don't have, and it is a collaboration. So I always want my clients to feel like they are a part of this process, but I, again, try to establish some boundaries about when and where. I've run many times into certain clients that will kind of just like send you either a text, like checking in, to say, oh, hey, how's it going? And me wanting to, again, make them feel good about this, I'll send them like a screenshot of something, and that may start a whole dialogue about something that is completely not finished. I'm just showing them like a little work in progress, something just to give them a little boost. And if you let it, that can totally spin into a bunch of different iterations that you hadn't set up in your contract to actually work on. Which then brings me to revision. So effectively, the way I look at the vast majority of my projects is there's this project fee, which is either based on something hourly or just and there's another slide about this, but basically it's the same thing whether you're setting up a project fee, for me at least, or a per hour fee. But it's very, 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 very clear within that what that amount of money gets them. I think that's a mistake that I was making at first, and lots of my friends were making, is that because they understand it really quickly and they can probably do it quickly, that it won't take that many revisions, it'll be easy. Don't have to be too specific about that. Probably incorrect. Pick a number. Always pick a number, because if you want to do like initial presentation and 2 revisions of something, pretty often it's not even that you need 4, but they may have questions that actually require 4, but you can't see that. So you have to set up sort of a way to accommodate that later on, like, well, past 2 revisions, it's this much per hour, or it's this much more per revision, that kind of thing. Yeah, very critical to be clear about that from the jump, and then again, you rarely will have to revisit that, or even if you do have to revisit it, you have a place to go to talk about it, which is a contract or a letter of agreement to say, well, in the original thing it was this, and we talked about this, so if you think it's going to be, you want to see maybe 2 more revisions, then it's going to be this, and it doesn't feel like you're just making up numbers. I think that's really important, is because what we do is a bit nebulous to people, or maybe way more than nebulous to people. I think it can feel like the way that we might price something to someone isn't really based on anything other than, that's how much I want to make for doing that. And for me, it's never that. It's how long do I realistically think this is going to take me based on other stuff I've done, times the hourly rate. There's your answer. Okay, similar to that, no scope creep. So if you've scoped out a project, you're like, I'm going to do some sketches, maybe some 3D models, some prints, or some hand models, or whatever it is, some illustrations. That is as good as set in stone, or perhaps in diamond, or whatever the hardest material we have is. And again, more work is more money. Almost. I would say always, almost always. There are times when, say, I was working on like a little baby toothbrush product, and it has all these like little bristles on basically like a big silicone thimble. And maybe 9 months later, my client was trying to get a patent on it, and he said, hey, can you answer these questions from the patent attorney? And so then I opened the questions and just read them through, and I said, oh, okay, yeah, not a problem, easy, because Mike and I are cool. We've had a good working relationship. We've done a couple projects together, and it helps him out to not have to even bother charging him for something that probably took me 30 minutes or something like that. And again, that's 30 minutes I theoretically could have been doing something else, but I like Mike, and he's not really asked me to do this whole crazy thing that's going to spin into all this other stuff, as far as I could tell, and it didn't. So I'm happy to do that stuff. But there are other clients where I would absolutely, because working with them just takes so much time, or there's so much emailing, which is another, basically any time I'm talking to a client, that's billable time. That's time I would have been doing anything else. So if I've got some clients are really, 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 really reliant on email, and there can be a ton of back and forth that takes a lot of time. And that is, again, time you could be doing something else. So just be mindful about where the wiggle room is for you. And for you, that might not be a big deal, but for me, I realize that can really turn into a massive time suck. And so the way that you curb that is it costs money. For most people, that will stop them. It's a business, not a hobby, so get your money. So get used to talking about money. The link here, and I'm going to send this presentation to Max, and he'll send it to whoever wants it, along with a few other things. So all these links you can check out yourself. But I found that a really useful strategy when there's something I'm uncomfortable with is to just go and learn about it. You don't have to do anything with it just yet. Just go learn about it, absorb it, get a bit of a framework or a structure, talk to your friends about it, whoever else is interested in it. That I found is so helpful. It takes a lot of pressure off of me from feeling like I've got to go become an expert at whatever, QuickBooks or something like that that has to do with like the infrastructure of running a business. But yeah, that was a huge thing for me. I just wasn't that comfortable with talking about money because I had all kinds of self-worth ideas wrapped up in that. And you really start to equate your worth as a person to the money and the project and the success of it and all those kinds of things. And it's just not it. So, and I even I went to a workshop once about creatives and their relationship to money. Like that's where I was at. Like I felt like I really needed help to figure that out because I didn't know who else to talk to about it. So there are all kinds of groups that are talking about all kinds of things. And it's all on the internet. It's all pretty easy to find. So if you feel like you're wrestling with some of those things, you can probably find some kind of workshop or some other way to get that skill that you need. Find your people. For me, I just call them like they're like my 3 dork community because we're like 3D dorks. Like that's all we talk about. I have a friend from New York that I G-chat with nearly daily about something to do with 3D. I have another friend that I haven't even met in person. Don't even quite remember how we met, but we G-chat all the time similarly about 3D things. And I find that for me, if I was sitting in my apartment all the time and it's just me in my own head, I'd probably go a little bit nuts. So it's huge to go out and find the people that really care about the same things that you do, especially professionally and especially if you're working independently. And whether that's like you're actually trying to go out and find a design group of some kind, or you're just, you're trying to find like a line dancing group so that you can like dance it out. You know what I mean? You have to find community. I think community is one of the, especially now, when we're all in our phones, it's really important to find people that you can talk to face, if possible. I know I just said I just G-chat with a bunch of friends, but I have friends, and I live in Santa Monica. I have friends around LA as well that I meet with some regularity, either friends from grad school or friends from projects that I meet and talk to about these things because they're important to all of us, and I think it makes the community stronger. Okay, well, I'll come back to that in a second. So one of my favorite quotes is by a guy named William McDonough that wrote the book On the Left, Cradle to Cradle. He said, and he similar lecture to this, but it was at the University of Cincinnati, and it's more of an architecture talk because he's an architect. And he said, you don't have to be the best, just do what only you can do. And I don't think I shed a tear at that moment, but almost, because it immediately, like I think there's a lot of pressure, whether that's self-imposed or sort of culturally imposed, to be the best, to be the superlative of something. And I think that construct is probably flawed. I think that there is room for all of us to do what we want to do or what we're interested in. It may sound cheesy, but you kind of have to believe it. And again, like go find the things that reinforce that this is possible. And then the second, the Be Remarkable, is from, I'm not sure if it's exactly from The Purple Cow, but that's my favorite of the books that Seth Godin wrote that I've read. He's a marketing guru of sorts, super digestible. Really, these books are most of his books are like 100 pages or so. A lot of sage advice in there, but The Purple Cow, actually I think it is from that, because The Purple Cow, the anecdote is basically, imagine you're driving down the road. Cows are black and white typically, or black and brown, or white and brown. But if you saw a purple cow, you'd probably tell someone about it, right? So stand out, and which is to say, be yourself, be authentic. So when he says be remarkable, he means that literally, like be worth talking about. And I think the best way to do that is to first be remarkable to yourself, and so that when you're talking to people about those things you care about, that energy and excitement will shine through, and that's what will make people remember you much more than like that one sketch or that project. I think it's much more about sort of your personal, what you're sending out, what you're emitting to people. I think people can read that stuff. So, if you feel like, oh, well, maybe I just want to do medical design because there's good money in it and it seems secure, but you're not really into it, I don't think you're going to talk to people about that, or like in an interview. You're not going to shine, because you're basically just kind of playing it safe. And sometimes sometimes that's required. Sometimes that's necessary. But at the times that it's not, I think it's really worth trying to stand out. And a story I told the seniors when I spoke to them a bit earlier was that when I was driving to Minnesota one summer for one of my internships, at the time I had a 6 or 7 inch afro. And my father, being an associate dean at an engineering college, was a little concerned. And so he said, "So, you gonna keep the afro?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And immediately after that, I said, it's like my litmus test. Like, if I'm not that interested in people that don't want to talk to me because of how I look, like, that's fine. Like, no judgment, but noted. We don't have to. You know what I mean? Or you might have to, but like, that's, for me, that wasn't a negotiable thing, to deal with to address personal appearance in that way. Like, nothing against my dad or whatever, because he was, I think, very much just concerned that I would do well and have a good experience, and didn't want something seemingly as trivial as a hairstyle to ruin that. But in a way, I look back at it as, like, at the time, I'd say that was one of my stronger ways of being remarkable, I guess, or at least standing out, if that's not actually remarkable. So I always encourage people to really think about what you care about, and to talk about that, and because I think that's going to shine through, and that will be the thing that hooks you in people's minds. And you don't have to, and it's not like you have to, it's not a popularity contest. You don't need every company ever to want to hire you, right? You just need one, you know, and you want it to be the right one, the one that the fit is good. So, and I think being authentic about what you're interested in is the surest path to finding that. A book I read in grad school is called The Cheese Monkeys. It's about a design, he's really an art school, but totally works for design students as well. Highly recommended read. It's maybe 200 pages. It's hysterical. I laughed out loud probably 20 times in the course of that book, because so many of the experiences were exactly mine when I was going through grad school. And the biggest, the little vignette in the story is that a very gruff, not so nice, or at least he didn't seem that way, type of professor sends all his students out on the highway, and this is out in, it might have been Minnesota, but a cold state in the winter, and he gives them all like a poster board and one marker each, drops them off and says, "I'll see you back at school. Figure it out." And so they all eventually do it, and they get back, and so he asked them, "Why do you think I gave you one marker instead of like a bucket of markers to choose from?" They had no idea. And he said, "Well, you would have all frozen to death, because you would have been picking out which color is like the best color that's going to attract somebody's attention, that kind of thing. It's like none of you would have made it home." So in that case, you got to see your limits as opportunities, or constraints as opportunities. And that's something that has stuck with me since the moment I read that sentence. It's never left me. That and I haven't always been able to fully embrace it, that is for sure. Like, I wasn't able to see how certain things were limits, or how things that seemed like limits or constraints were opportunities at the time. But eventually, for the most part, I've been able to figure out how that has helped me move forward at some point. So I think the practice is basically, once you bump into something, you have to feel that moment of, ugh, and then as quickly as you can, switch it to, how can this work for me? How can this work for me? How can this work for me? How is this useful? Because I think the more you can compress that lag between, like, this thing's screwing me over, or like, this professor says I have to do it this way, or one of the things I wish had been said to me, not necessarily in design school, but even before that, was that a lot of what you're learning about is people are basically trying to see if you can pay attention, or if you can jump through the hoop properly. And so that's why some things aren't like, but it'd be so much easier if we just did this way. It's like, right, but that's not the task, or it's not always the task. So always try to figure out that's the fastest thing you can do. That's what, for me, often gets rid of like the struggle and the strife of feeling like a victim of a limit of some kind, is to turn that around and try to figure out how that's going to work for me. And I find that the sooner I do that and the more diligently I do that, the more quickly that solution comes. It's like when you're, it's like if everything is a nail, or how's that go? If you're a hammer, everything's a nail kind of thing. Not necessarily. There are other ways of looking at things. And the more that you can start to do that and learn to do that, I think so many things open up to you from a possibility standpoint that you wouldn't have seen, again, because it just looked like nails to you the whole time when it wasn't nails at all. And also, I listen to a ton of podcasts, and there's a recurring theme that to me feels, and I watch a lot of basketball. I see a lot of folks like getting injured, like blowing out ACLs and Achilles and stuff like that, and commentators like, they'll never be the same, the career's over. Or not. Or that person got really good at shooting threes instead of like flying through the lane. You know what I mean? They're able to find another way to do the thing. But I think it's very much about making a choice to find another way. That, well, who knows? Maybe someone chopped off my right hand. You know what I mean? Now I got to find another way to draw. You know what I mean? Or I've heard of someone that drew so much with their right hand that they had carpal tunnel so bad that they couldn't draw, and they were like, I guess I'll learn to draw with my left hand. And they did. So it's not like everything is a career ender. So feel free to reinvent yourself. There might be that thing that you were curious about once upon a time. When you're hitting that limit, maybe that's the time to explore that other thing. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's a little message for you. So definitely feel free to reinvent yourself at any time. Or going back to just the types of industries that you might want to work in, that may change. And that's okay. So don't ever feel bad about that. Like, I'm just tired of the packaging thing, or I'm tired of eyewear, or I'm tired of electronics or shoes or whatever. It's really okay. Try not to build so much identity into the work. I mean, it's important on some level, but I think when it's time to change and you start to feel like just the pains of that, it's important to pay attention to that stuff, to think about why I'm feeling that way. Whether that's just an interpersonal thing or it really is the thing I'm working on itself. So, process things. Okay, so the reason why I'm so excited about the things that I'm excited about moving forward are because the things in the past, at various points, felt like that, like legit. And the number of times where I've wanted to throw a computer out the window, there's so many times. There's just so many times where I feel like the computer let me down, and I'm mad about it, and or whether that's like I have to use this certain software. So for me, what all that stuff was telling me, all the tension was telling me, was that at various points it was time to start investigating other stuff. So for me, the biggest thing as an independent designer has been to really hop on the wellness train and to build everything else around that, like whether that's professional types of projects as well as my life. So if you start to work independently or take on freelance projects, is that like on the side from a full-time job, is that it feels like I don't have free time. I don't have the separation that is maybe the luxury of having like an office job, of where I can go in there and I can work, and when I'm out of there, it's over, and I can have my weekend or I can have my evenings. But for me, what I do, so the guy on the left is doing yoga, even if that doesn't look like Instagram yoga, that is also yoga. So for me, I do yoga almost every day, and I discovered eventually that the middle of the day for me is a really good time to do that, because if I'm up early and I've gone to walk the dog, and I can come back and sit down and do some work for a few hours, get up, go move, work my body a bit, calm my mind a little bit, and come back to it. That's really great. I think something I picked up completely by just not thinking about it in school was this idea of hard work. And the longer I worked at it, the better it was going to be. Not sure. Not sure at all. I'm not sure how much value there is to certain types of like self-punishment in a way. So, and again, a lot of that I think has to do with maybe when you're in studio. I'm going to get to some tools at some point here, but I would highly advise that you start to learn to do things like tracking your time now. So you start to develop that sense in your body of like, oh, I've been sitting here for 7 hours. That's why my back's like this. You know what I mean? You got to get up and go move. You also, I think we're pretty inundated with information on all levels, interpersonal, internet, all kinds of stuff. I would highly advise that you start meditating, even if it's for like a minute or two. You can work up. It's to me, I don't think it's really about how long you're doing it. I think it's that you're taking the time to take care of yourself is what's really, really important. Side benefit of meditation that I found as a creative professional, it's where so many of my ideas come from, or like where they'll like really come into like an actual formed sort of visual in my head in a way that they weren't before. There's much more like a product, just like putting lines on paper and stuff like that. A lot more, it's a much more like heady process these days. And I think that's because I'm a lot more tuned into myself, into what's going on around me. So I'm more able to pick up the things that are going on around me, and just, it's like ideas are everywhere now in a way. And they've kind of always been that way, but in a way that feels like a lot less effort than it was before. Another thing I've discovered for me that is important is the food you eat. Haven't looked too closely at what's in any vending machines around here. Highly recommended to eat good food. Vegetables, most specifically if possible. They have all the things that help your brain work. A lot of the processed stuff just doesn't, and it makes it way harder to get through. There are times when you have to work a late night. I still sometimes have all-nighters. Way less than before, though. Like, just a completely different experience of those. And now when I have them, it's not like, like I just crack my head on my keyboard. Like, I can get through them. I'm awake. I feel good. I'm tired, but it's not like I'm just like dragging myself through this kind of thing. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fuel that you put in your body. And then the last one, I'm a big fan of ping pong. Whoever wants that work can come and get it. I love it. And it's where a lot of my high school competitiveness has gone, is now into ping pong. So find a way to play, to not just take a break and take a walk. That's great, also part of it. Find a way to do something that recharges you in that way, to an active thing that just gets your body going. And also for me, the competition of that is really nice. And now I can put my competitive into that instead of probably more, and not as usefully putting that into like competing with someone at work or something like that, which is I think what I was doing for a long time. So find a place for that. I don't think competing in that type of way at work is necessarily the healthiest thing. Because again, I think it's really easy to wrap yourself into that in a way that won't be helpful for you. Oh yeah, and unlike a college degree, it's an ongoing practice. That was the thing, that's a huge part of this that I think I didn't understand. It may sound like a bunch of work, like, oh, I have to like keep learning and finding new stuff and keep trying. Yes, you do. Because you will change. You will grow and change and be wiser and older, have more experience, and things that used to matter to you may not matter to you as much anymore, and you have to find a new way I'll have to find a new ping pong or something like that. You know what I mean? So just regard it as an ongoing thing, and it may change over time. Okay, so some tools. Airtable, does anybody know what that is? Yes, nobody, great. So it's like it's kind of like an online database, like a relational database, and just 3 things I do with it all the time. I track my time in there. It's a free tool, by the way. There are paid editions, but I haven't needed any of that yet. I track my time in there, and I capture my ideas. The time tracking is great. The idea capture on a personal level is actually way more valuable to me. So what I do is I still have like a little sketchbook with me most of the time. I draw little crunchy doodles. I don't draw big, sweepy arm stuff anymore. It's mostly like visual note-taking for me. And I realize I have a stack, as tall as the podium roughly, and I was like, what if the apartment burns down though? Shit, that'd be terrible because I'd lose all my ideas. So the fastest thing is, if you're doodling something out, you can just take a photo of it, put it in your record, some notes, and at least it's there. So I've washed notebooks plenty of times, lost them, they've been stolen, and it's always a bummer. So as much as you can to capture something in the moment, it's a really great way to put like a really great central place to have everything. And then also for project management, it's come in really handy as a way to try to get clients off of so much back and forth with the email, because that just gets out of control quickly. So it's a great tool, and all the little icons up there are things that it connects to among many others. So I'm a big Evernote user as well. Again, for all my rhyme writing, I tend to put it mostly in there. So if I'm working on like a mixtape idea with a friend, we can collaborate really easily on that. It's just it's the most flexible tool I've ever found for this type of thing. And going back to Evernote, I have an Evernote that's as tall as a doorway, literally, if you print it out, of me trying to find something like this, because that's how tough it was. And it all started when I had a business partner. We were trying to find like a project management tool that was cross-platform and was in the cloud and just did everything that we needed to, and we never really found it. But years later, I found Airtable, and I've been really happy with it ever since. Not sponsored, just free advice. I don't like to dream about getting paid at all. It's like the worst nightmare. So if you're seriously considering getting some freelance something going, I highly recommend QuickBooks. The peace of mind that it gives me, that I can just hop into the dashboard and see like in 2 seconds what invoices are open, how much money I'm owed, or how much money is coming by this date or that date. Game changer. I was trying to do that with basically with Excel and Word before, like writing invoices and stuff like that. And a friend of mine was basically saying, he's like, well, they have other stuff that helps you do your taxes. Like they're trying to help you with the software. So just get on the train, man. And his background was in accounting. And I was like, should I really spend $30 a month on that? He's like, do you make more than $30 a month? I was like, well, yeah. He's like, then it's worth it. And he's completely right. So it may not be the right thing for you immediately, but for me, it's been a pretty meaningful game changer. And then the other thing that you discover once you're in there and people are starting to pay your invoices is that there's a bit of a lag time. It could be 2 days, could be 5 days, might blow out to like 8 days if we're talking holiday weekends. It's the least fun holiday weekend when you're waiting on money. You know what I mean? Because you're probably super low, and that's why you're waiting on the money. So something I recommend to people, even casually thinking about starting, just go and set up the accounts. All you're doing is putting in your personal information, setting up your email. Like, it's very basic, so that way when you need it, you have it. Because there's nothing worse than trying to, again, I have this food company trying to take a sale, and like they can't pay you because I didn't get the card reader in time, like all that kind of stuff. Just do it, and then you got it. And when you need it, it's there for you. Yes? Oh, for QuickBooks, if you don't pay, can you still use it? I am not certain if they're...
So there's free versions.
Oh, yeah.
I'll look it up in just a second. It'll allow you to generate invoices and track them as well. It's pretty good for that. There's a free version too.
Yes, there's a free version. And again, there are other sort of less all-encompassing types of tools that will allow you to create an invoice also for free. So if you just look up invoicing software, but that's, if you don't know, an invoice is the thing you send to someone that tells them that they need to send you money. So it's really important, and it's not just like you send somebody an email like, okay, just send me the $500. Like, you have to send them a formal thing.
It's called Zoho.
Oh yeah, Zoho.
Yeah. And the paid version is really good if you have to use that trying to, yeah.
Yeah, and that's another, I'd say it's for sure even more broadly considering a small business than QuickBooks is. I was going to say inventory is a good example. That's not a good example. But if you go to Zoho's website, you'll see that it's like this massive, before it was like all these sort of separate things under the same brand, and then they mushed it into one thing that at the time was called Zoho One. And so I used that, and I can't remember why offhand I switched. I think it was actually because it was more than I ended up needing. And then QuickBooks plugged into the tax stuff, so it worked out nicely. Okay, so another question I get all the time is, should you charge per project or per hour? To me, it's the same thing. And so the question I'm asking myself sort of once I get to a tabulation of how much a project would cost someone is, one, does that feel like the right amount of hours for the thing? And or if it's a project fee, the question is, does that seem like the right amount of money for this amount of work? But again, to me, it's pretty much the same calculation, because that if someone just likes their construct of this as a project fee, I'm basically, again, trying to accurately estimate how many hours this will take me times the hourly rate, and then it's just this lump sum. So to me, it's not really a question, but for a long time, I didn't understand that. To me, at least in my business, it's the same thing. Okay, so negotiating. This link goes to that YouTube talk. You'll get it later. But this is a guy that used to be, I believe, an FBI negotiator. And so I have That's Right hyperlink, because one of his anecdotes was that he had to get someone that was was holding someone hostage. Like they were just going back and forth and not making any progress. And in that process, he realized, in talking to some other negotiator friends, again, community, that it was the most important thing was probably to get this guy to agree with him about anything, about something. So to get somebody to say, so it's almost like you have to spit it back to them in a way where they're like, yep. And that triggers something in your brain where that's how the doorway of getting to a fair thing for both sides often happens. The other way I found, again, to very quickly suss something out, whether either this person is, I was going to say if they're serious about this project or not, that's not right, but basically if it's a good fit, and that is just ask them, like, how much money do you have for this? Like, what's your budget? I've sat in plenty of meetings where got through all this talking, everybody's excited, and they think it costs like $500, but it's really more like $15,000. But maybe they haven't done this before, or they have no practical expectation of what designing whatever widget should be, or how long that will take someone, and therefore how much it would cost. So that was something I learned from this business partner of mine, is just ask. Again, his family had a lot of business experience. They'd run lots of different types of businesses, and he also was a very shy kid. But his family just literally would force him as a kid into. He grew up in France to go to these like sort of different outdoor markets and negotiate with people. And he's like, it was the worst thing at first, but eventually. What changed his mind is he never understood that was just a normal thing. To him, it was like a really stressful thing. So eventually, with practice, it became a less stressful thing, and he was able and came to this realization: well, just ask them how much they have versus doing this weird song and dance and courtship. Just ask the question, man, because there's an answer to it, right? So, and that's what you want to know. Why be any less direct than that? And again, that's worked for me pretty well every time in business, and I've been able to quickly say, oh, great, or there's someone I want to refer you to. Okay, one of my favorite topics, software, where I spend a lot of my time. So these are, let me see, make sure. Yeah, I've used every one of these things up here, and what I would say is think about, what do you want to make? And how do you want to make it? So for me, I'll just skip to the next slide, where the things that at this point I care about are what you can see most of. So, okay. For me, and we're going to talk about Blender a little bit more in more depth, and I'm going to show you some videos of stuff that I'm really excited about. So I do most of my work, and most of my work is eyewear, though I've been working on this helmet project for a while. But most of that is in Blender directly. So, and then I'll take it from there into Rhino if need be, and use T-splines to make that a NURB surface. And then I can cut it or fillet it, usually, without too much fuss. And I can send it to a factory. And they're like, sweet, a step file, great. And they don't really care how heavy the data is because typically they're just going to rebuild it anyway. Moment of Inspiration is an interesting program that's a lot like Rhino. It's a NURBS surfacing modeler. It's about half the cost of Rhino. Also has a generative design plugin that's just called Node Editor. Rhino's is called Grasshopper. So basically the things that I haven't sort of whited out are the things that I may not use every day, but still hold some interest in certain respects. Obviously Photoshop and Illustrator, hard to get around them, it seems, unless you've messed around with GIMP or Inkscape, which are open source, basically versions of those things. Again, working as an independent person, you can kind of pick these things. I'll stop there with that. Does anybody know what Substance is? Okay, so Substance is a texturing tool. Imagine Photoshop, but your 3D model's in there, and you can spin it all around. You've got layers, masks. And Substance is really like sort of like a group name for 3 products that company makes. One is called Substance Painter, one is Substance Designer, and the other one is called Bitmap to Material, which is for making like a tileable material, just like lickety split, which I used to spend copious hours doing, and now I don't have to because they have software for that. One of the friend in New York that I talk to all the time about this stuff, he's like way into Substance, and he's like, that is the future. So he's like, stop. He's like, modeling is cool. He's like, but get into Substance. So it's like I'm getting there more and more quickly. But and the reason why that's important is basically the way that we've been taught modeling and rendering and adding a material to something is in no way the wrong way or the inaccurate way. But it's not I don't think it's the way that gives us the most control. And as people that are illustrating pretty detailed things, I think that something that can give us as much control as possible is helpful. So similar to Substance, but does anybody know what ZBrush is? Let me ask about that first. Okay, he knows ZBrush, cool. So ZBrush is a digital sculpting program. So let me see, no, let me come back. Okay, so the idea is that you could have an idea, and it's almost one of those things that we take for granted as designers is that, oh, I have an idea, let me draw it first. Has plenty of value, a ton of value, don't need a computer, can take it anywhere, just need a pen and paper. But I think what happens is that, again, sketches to me are basically guesses. And they're great and they're emotional, but the way that we're taught industrial design it's not a linear process, obviously, there's a lot of iteration, but I think it tends to pigeonhole 3D at the end. And what I'm excited about is trying to bring 3D way forward in the process so that we're not worrying so much about perfectly clean surfaces that have no wobbles in them and all that kind of stuff. We're much more trying to establish a silhouette and a form and a shape and doing it quickly and joyfully. Curious, you guys are learning SolidWorks only? Or what else are you learning for 3D besides SolidWorks?
Let's do SolidWorks and KeyShot in those courses here.
Okay, cool. So what's cool to me is that, okay, so most of how you're thinking about making a 3D model is pretty related to how you're making a sketch. Like I'm drawing lines, and eventually I may be shading that in to communicate form. But imagine if you could, in the same way that you're creating that sketch, super quick, light and easy, not worrying too much about details, you could do the same thing with a 3D object. So, and I'm going to show you some videos of some folks doing things like this. And I've done this on certain projects, but they're still way ahead of me. And a lot of these folks live in like CG land. So they're making models that aren't necessarily going to be turned into the type of model that you would cut steel for a tool to injection mold into or to blow mold into or any of that kind of stuff. It's almost exclusively for screen viewing in a movie, in an animation, something like that. So, so I think a tool like ZBrush, so there's a lot of overlap up here. So like, is it okay if I stand over here too?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So like ZBrush and Blender both can sculpt things, and so can 3D Coat. But you can like texture paint in Blender or Substance or 3D Coat, but you can't model anything in Substance. It's just for materials. So, and 3D Coat's a really unique tool as well, a bit less so now that ZBrush has developed some of its tools and users have developed add-ons for Blender. But it's based on voxels, which are like imagine grains of sand, so like a 3D pixel. And that's how you're generating form there. There are two modes. There's one that is much more like triangle polygon based, and then one that's like little grains of sand based. And you can kind of flip back and forth. But it was one of the first ones to have really, really nice texture painting tools in 3D. And so it still holds a lot of interest to me because they're tools that it has from, again, just very quick generative types of things, like just making a stroke and seeing a different thing and seeing a different thing and seeing a different option, that I think it's a very new and unfamiliar, uncomfortable skill to go from the sketching, and that's just how ideas come out of me, to that I'm now discovering them more in like happy accidents as I'm trying to do something else, as I'm moving all these polygons in and out of the way. But I think what's really cool about it is it's gratifying, because how many people have sat through a SolidWorks class and you're like, I still can't get this thing closed. Like I can't get that fillet to work, or I can't just whatever the software is being fussy about. Yeah, that nod, that's a very knowing nod right there, okay. So, I was telling Max, one of my favorite stories from grad school is two friends of mine were sitting and working on Alias in the Alias lab, and I couldn't believe what I saw, but I promise this is real. They had printed out the sketch and taped it to the screen because they couldn't remember how to get the image plane to come into the software. So everybody learns and absorbs this stuff differently, and I think a lot of people have frustrations with the curve-based sort of associative parametric approach that mostly mimics how we think when we sketch. But I think what's really gratifying is that you can really quickly add detail or not, or really quickly change like the proportion of a form, like by going like that. You know what I mean? And it's a very different, less precise feeling way of working, but I think the amount of output that you can get and the amount of exploration that you can do, and it's something that you can either print them all out at miniature, you can render them, you can send them into Unreal Engine to see them in real time. I think the power of that is huge. Go ahead.
Alias is $15,000?
You know, I don't think it's that much anymore, but or isn't like Alias Design like 4,500 or something like that?
15 grand. How much is Substance? Because I can't find that.
$20 a month.
Does it do lighting as well?
Yeah, so it has tools where, yes, you can absolutely create like a sort of a cinematic animation. You can output a rendering from it. I think it runs on iRay, if I'm not mistaken.
You ever learned Revit?
No.
And last question for now. Substance is Autodesk, right?
No.
I'm sorry.
Algorithmic. Alias is Autodesk. So for me, I've had enough experience with those products from that company that I'm out. I'm all set. I'm good. Great. I did a gas station related project in 3D Studio Max at my first job. I remember sitting down, I think I bought a DVD for Maya for some submarine project when I knew that SolidWorks was probably not the right answer for what we were trying to do. And I knew that I was going to be the only person in that office to go find a better answer. And plus, whatever you could render out of SolidWorks at the time was not great. And whatever you could do in 3D Studio Max was far superior. So that was how I landed on Max for that particular thing. But let's see, was the other thing in here? Oh, so that's just Google Slides. I remember a lot of folks thought I was crazy. My very last portfolio in design school, I did it in PowerPoint. And everybody's like, are you gonna break out your Crayola markers next? You know what I mean? Like no one took it seriously. So, but I was like, well, it's a presentation software and I'm making a presentation, so why would I use InDesign? Or something that was, I mean, there were miles of students in there trying at our print lab, like trying to print out portfolios and make multi-page PDFs when that was way harder then than it is now. I feel like using InDesign to make a portfolio presentation is just way overkill. You just need stuff on slides at a decent resolution. There are free options. Oh, so that's the other thing I like to point out. Blender's free. Unreal Engine is free. Google is free. GIMP and Inkscape and Krita are free. Krita is a painting software. So it's not so much like an image manipulation type of program like Photoshop or GIMP are. It's primarily for painting in 2D, but it's also free. And it has the way I evaluate software is like, does this company, do they seem to care about their user base? Are they listening to their user base? And do they make changes accordingly? That was a big thing with me for Autodesk, where I said, I don't think I can keep rocking with this. And I should have put Fusion 360 up there, because I used that briefly for a project or two, just because it has T-splines in it, so the interchangeability of NURBS to solids or polygons rather is pretty straightforward. But I knew it wasn't quite the right design freedom tool for me. So, and also I was actually thinking a lot about students when I was really thinking about the future of what I was going to be doing, because I was saying, well, if I'm trying to suggest to students that they go pay $800 for ZBrush to do all this sculpting stuff, I think I probably lost most of you, like from an interest level standpoint, right? But Blender's free. You can go download it right now. And you can do all this stuff. There's a video editor in there. You can do particle simulations. The community is for sure, ZBrush has a real trumpeting type of community. Blender's is for sure bigger because it's free and there are users all around the world, just like the rest of these software. So, and the last one is Unreal Engine. Does anybody know what that is? Okay, a few nods. So to me, I'm hopeful that one day Unreal Engine will generally eclipse Keyshot as a thing that we're being taught how to use and using professionally as well. I was saying to Max earlier, and I think some of the seniors as well, that they're, too long on that slide. There we go. Basically what happened was I decided one year, I was like, man, maybe I'll get into visualization stuff more. I'm not worried so much about industrial design and making these hardcore models. Maybe I'll just make great looking pictures of this stuff. And what I discovered, or my experience with that was, it's not bad, but everybody thinks whatever object looks different than it looks in that photo on their screen. And it's pretty maddening to have to go to try to, basically they want something that's not real. Like that's not how lights look when they bounce off a metal surface onto plastic through the clear thing. It's just not how it looks. Because it's a physically based render in Blender and in Modo, what I was specifically doing all this visualization work in. And it just became just revisions upon revisions upon revisions upon revisions for things that just don't matter. or certainly at that stage don't matter. And again, when someone has like a real particular idea of what a thing actually looks like, now we're getting away from photorealism in a way that's really hard to have a conversation about, especially if that person isn't someone that's especially fluent in 3D. So for me, the aha moment with Unreal Engine, and actually I'll go up a slide so you can see it. I was really hot on this one here, which is SimLab Composer, which is actually built on Unreal. So imagine if you had Keyshot. It's almost exactly like Keyshot, except there's a VR component, there's a simulation component to it. So you could pretty quickly just throw a model in and start spinning it around and stuff like that, which was, and it seemed like way less, it seemed way less intense, like less of like a new thing I'd have to learn than Unreal did. So I said, well, I'll put Unreal on the shelf and spend some time in SimLab. Even to the point, I'm well known for this. If I find some new cool tool, I'll start to kick the tires on it a bit. I'll say like, oh, why is this clicker's off, or the turn down arrow or is weird, and so I'll like write a completely unsolicited email to whoever will listen at that company, like, hey, I have free advice. Can I tell you about it? Like, the timing of your clicks is weird, and like, the view cube is off, or I can't get a true orthographic view for some reason in SimLab. So over time, again, it was like I started to bump up against things that were like, it's all the power is there, but it's like the steering wheel is on backwards, or it's in the trunk or something like that. So that's when I started to look again at Unreal. And again, really nice of them. They sent me a free seat of the software because I was giving them like legit valuable insight. And I also, I told them that they should write a bridge from ZBrush directly to SimLab so that people in that sort of CGI, sculpty type of community could have like a quick way to render their model, because Keyshot had smartly already done that. And they're like, oh. They're thinking about like mechanical design, a bit of industrial design, a bit of architecture. There's one other big thing that they're way into. But they hadn't at all thought about the CGI market. So that was when they sent me the free seat, like, thank you for telling us. Because all of a sudden they found themselves a bunch of new users that could quickly just, boop, shoot a model right over, right back, live linking, all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't all this like file saving and keeping track of all that stuff. So quick bit about hardware. Well, that computer is this computer. It's an Asus, it's a PC. I jettisoned the Mac thing right around when I think I started working on my own, largely due to graphics cards. Love the build quality of a Mac, love what Mac is about, maybe used to be about. But at this point, the truest differentiator for me is going to be the graphics card. And that, again, that has a lot to do with things like Unreal Engine and the rendering engine that's in Cycles. So, and they're getting cheaper and more affordable as they're making them faster and stuff like that. So that's that. The tablet that I use is made by a company called, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody pronounce it. It's Huion, Huion. But they make pretty low cost tablets that you can buy on Amazon that have a similar pressure sensitivity to a Wacom tablet for like $80 instead of $300. So, and they also make really nice displays that are a lot like a Cintiq, in that it's like a full screen and I can paint and sculpt on it. But it's like $500 instead of $2,200. So, and I think at first their first release of stuff was okay. It's a lot better now. So I like their products a lot. There was a point where I was working on this laptop all the time, and I'm just doing this, and my head is down on a desk, and I could start to feel it. And so for just $239, you can buy a 43-inch HD TV on Amazon, and that's what sits on my desk. So it's like, I mean, I almost have to turn my head to look from side to side, but it's awesome. It's really great. There's nothing like modeling super huge. So, so that was a pretty big game changer for me too. Currently I have a few 3D printers. The first one was the MakerBot there in the middle with the little castle inside. It's been kind of a workhorse, had it for a long time. I think it was around 2013 or maybe 2012 when my business partner and I bought that. It was about $2,600 at the time. And we quickly discovered that it was good for some stuff, and that's not about MakerBot, that's just about that type of technology for printing something. So I had that for a while, and then something broke on it, and I just kind of never fixed it for probably about 2 years or so. And more recently I got it working, but then it broke again, and I was frustrated. So, and also that helmet project I'm working on, I convinced our client to buy this Tron XY printer and let it live at my house. They don't have an office or anything yet. Again, it's sort of a new company. So because that printer was $300, and so far every time we printed a helmet or shell to check size or all that fit stuff, it was about $150. So if we could get 2 prints out of this thing, we're back at zero, and everything after that gets a lot cheaper. Like I think I calculated the material cost to be about $10 a helmet or something like that. Now, that said, it's a bit of a tinkerer type of machine. So I've had to tighten belts when layers get weird, or if like surfaces aren't like really flat, that's like if it's a true dead flat surface, there'd be like wobbles in it and stuff like that. I don't really have time for that, is what I'll say at this point. Like I needed to just print out the thing that's on my screen. So that became frustrating, and I also, actually kind of a cool thing that happened is the nicest thing about that is that it has this magnetic bed. So if anybody's ever had trouble getting like a print off the bed and like you just can't get the scraper under there, it has this magnetic bed that just peels right off with the model stuck on it, and it's way easy to get it off because it's this sort of floppy giant magnet thing. However, I left town once and my roommate was kind of watching it for me, and I don't think it's anything he did, but somehow that nozzle got like dug down into this like sort of soft-ish type material and just scratched the hell out of that magnet. Thank goodness for Facebook user groups. Someone recommended that you could just buy like a 12-inch mirror tile from Home Depot and throw that down, and it heats up and cools down, everything sticks and comes right off. So that was easily fixable, thank goodness. But now I have this problem where the filament sensor can't tell that there is filament in there for some reason. So I got to figure out how to cut something out of the G code to get that to work. So again, it's a bit of a DIY type of machine, and you do have to put it together, but was it 45 minutes or something, Anna? You were sitting there, right? Sorry, my girlfriend's here. She was watching me put it together. When we put the 3D printer, it took maybe 45 minutes or so. So it's not hard, but again, it creates a bit of sort of user, like there are little tolerances that can stack up on you and be a little weird. I've also had like an end stop just like fall off in the middle of a print. I happened to be sitting there, but if I wasn't, it was like the next time the nozzle was coming down, it was just going to dig into the bed. So looking for something a little more put together. And then most recently, I haven't even used it yet. It's sitting assembled but not used in my bedroom, is the one on the left. It's an Elegoo Mars, and that was maybe $280 or so, and that's a resin printer. So imagine a cell phone screen sitting under like a clear vat of resin, and at every layer it's like a black and white image, so it's curing that entire layer at one time, versus like an FDM machine has to like move all the way around that layer kind of thing. So it's an equivalent-ish speed thing, but the build volume is considerably smaller. But that works for me because I do a lot of jewelry and eyewear, and I can stack stuff in there. Yeah?
How much was that? Because it looks like the Formlabs, but those are about $8,000.
Yeah, right. It was about $280, I want to say.
I don't know about resin, though. I mean, I totally agree with everything, but if you buy something under $1,000, you're going to have to tinker with it, and there's a learning.
There's going to be some tinkering, and a lot of what I watched, honestly, I was watching a lot of reviews about this machine and 2 or 3 others that are almost the same build envelope, same exact technology, and just trying to figure out which one they're like, yeah, I haven't had problems with this, or like I did have to replace the clear lens thing, but it was easy.
Like crazy for the first 90 days and make sure it's not going to break on you, but it'll wear out anyway.
Yeah, at some point, but it's like they are pretty affordable, and I've also noticed like in the difference between like a company like Tron XY versus Elegoo, just noticing like how different their user manuals are and their websites are. Those kinds of things, like one is way more professional than the other, so I'm really excited for the smaller one, and I'm hopeful.
Yeah,
I'll keep you posted.
For it, don't buy it because you're going to get stuck.
You're going to be on an island. No fun. Yeah.
What kind of resin barrier was it again? Like, what is it called exactly?
It's Elegoo, Elegoo, and Mars is the name of the model. And their resins, a liter is maybe $25 or something like that, and yeah, they're supposed to be very simple to use, pretty easy to adjust. A lot fewer things to adjust than on an FDM printer is what is true. Yeah.
What's the build area on the resin printer?
It's about, let me see, I think it's 68 is the short front back dimension. It's about 155 millimeters, and then the side to side is probably 100. I figured out that I could take 3 pair of eyewear, and if I take the temples off of the fronts and stand everything up, that I could fit 3 pair of eyewear in there, roughly. There are the next one that you can find that's larger is the, I just heard of it the other day, and it's more like $1,500. That has a slightly bigger volume, and then you're getting more into like a Form 2 or 3 or the Form 3XL, which again is in that $5,000 to $10,000 range.
It's on your desk to make you anything really well.
Yeah, but again, they're super reliable though. So that's the trade-off for now. Hopefully, they'll get this stuff kind of worked out. So Then sort of in the near term, I'm hoping to kind of get a little farm of those guys going as I'm looking at more low volume production-y things. And then the one with the yellow guy there is, it's a bigger build volume than even the one I have. So the Tron XY one there is about 300 millimeters roughly cubic. That one's about 400 millimeters cubic. And I'm looking more at printing things that might be like table legs that I might take to an aluminum foundry to have cast, that kind of thing. Because again, at that scale, all those build lines don't matter nearly as much because the object's so much bigger. Also, this laptop is been pretty cool. It has a GTX 1070 in it, but that's a Razer Blade, I think it's called, the 15-inch, and it's got the newer technology that's an RTX, which is just going to help run everything faster. And also, they call it Mercury Space Gray or something like that, or Mercury Gray. This thing gets incredibly dirty, incredibly dirty because it's black. So it's a weird cosmetic thing to me, but that's another reason why I like that one. And it's a little bit lighter. And this is, I think, actually like a 17-inch laptop's like case, but it's got like a 15.6-inch monitor in. So it's kind of hulking, even though it doesn't really need to be. And it's also, this one's plastic, and you can really see the tweaky torquiness versus that one's metal. So that would be wide. And I've had this one maybe 2 or 3 years now. Do you have a question back there?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay. And then in the future, more of the Elegoo, those guys are made by Anycubic, and that Deceptive, I tried to get things sort of in scale, but the one that's on the left, can you see my mouse? Yeah, this one here is actually like, it's not quite as tall as this podium, but almost. I was shocked when I started watching videos. It's like this big, even though the build volume's kind of the lower half. And then there's a smaller version, that guy still. And looking more at trying to find lighter laptops. I've been doing more traveling recently, and again, this thing's getting heavy, so starting to investigate if I can find a really thin, this is actually a 17-inch LG laptop that has like no graphics card in it, but then this is an external graphics card sort of hub. And some of these even have places where you can put a hard drive, so it can almost become like a mini like tower enclosure. So starting to look at more creative solutions to help make myself more mobile, but still have power if I'm home. Because if I'm out and about, I probably am not needing too much horsepower, or certainly for modeling. I still have an old Surface Pro 3 that I use with some frequency, even for Blender stuff. So it's not great for rendering, but for modeling is fine. And also, I thought it was super cool. Have you guys seen the dual screen monitor laptops yet? Okay, yeah, these they're on it. Because my idea, I would just be so stoked if, honestly, not even that one, but really this one, if I could draw on that and not have to take that tablet with me, kind of a game changer. It's just one less thing to have to charge and plug in and keep track of. Nobody's figured it out, although I did find a Lenovo laptop from kind of eons ago where they had put a little one off to the side somewhere. And there was a collaboration with Wacom, but it clearly never took off. So that's the kind of stuff I'm looking at as I'm thinking about how mobile I want to be in the future. Okay, so then this is a quick thing I wanted to talk about with that's really specific to eyewear and process. But basically, we all start with inspiration. And up top, the top blue line is sort of the very, very traditional process of what I walked into when I started at Marchand. And there's some inspiration given to you, and then we're going to do Illustrator for a couple months, basically. And at some point, a brand team will come in and look at things. The licensor will look at some stuff, have some comments, and then we're going to make technical drawings. So it's exactly these rendered things that we've made, but now we've got to make them black and white. We've got to put sections and all that shenanigans. Heaven forbid anything changes in that process, or someone comes in at the last minute like, oh, can you make it 2 millimeters bigger? And you're like, oh, can I give it to you tomorrow? And they're like, no, I need it now. And you're like, all right, well, that can't happen, but I will try. And then you're going to wait 4 or 5 weeks for a prototype from the factory, hoping that they understand what you gave them. They don't, ever on the first one. It's never right. So then you make some corrections, and in the meantime, you're also doing these color CADs, which is just more Illustrator renderings of like temple, like the side view and the front view, basically. And a funny story about that, so things that I've bumped into, like, why do we do it this way? So what it turned out was, at Marchand, there's a design department, and right across the cubicle wall is our development department. And the reason why we did the color CADs and that they didn't do the color CADs, like we would always have to do like the renderings, but then we really got stuck with it because all the little information of like what the eye size was and the DBL and the temple length, they couldn't change any of that stuff because it was an Illustrator, and they don't use Illustrator. So I said, well, why don't we just use my favorite tool at the time, PowerPoint, and I just make you a custom vertical. They printed everything out on 11 by 17. So I said, well, let's just make a 11 by 17 PowerPoint. We'll drop the images in. Feel free to change them whenever you like. It's not our job to do that stuff. Like, to do the renderings for sure is our job, but to manage like what the style name was going to become and all the other like data around it, couldn't care less. But we got stuck doing it just because we used the tool that did part of that job. And the second we did that, like things got way more fluid, and there's less of these like sort of what felt like to us like very trivial requests to change, type, that they could just do themselves. So again, they didn't understand it this way at first, but eventually they saw it as, oh, they're empowering us to just do this ourselves, and it's less back and forth and communication, and eventually everybody was really happy about it. So that's the color CADs. Then we send more of that stuff out, another technical drawing with comments and stuff, get another, maybe get another second factory prototype before we've got to like press go, make it, which is a bit dicey and the volumes in eyewear aren't especially high. They're not like, remote controls or something like that. Like, we're talking more like under 10,000 pieces of a style. So even still, it's a bit of a risk and a bit of a jump to take to hope that that's going to be just so when you get it back, and especially on something where the details really do matter. So overall, that was taking us 18 months, sometimes 20 or 22 months to like say, this was the concept and here's the final thing that you can sell to someone. So then what we proposed, because again, we were working on Nike, which had a different fit than like a more fashionable, fashion-driven type of eyewear. There's a very, 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 very long process discussion about the traditional process versus how we were trying to do it to integrate a 3D printer that we had just purchased at the time. But we basically would go from a hand sketch, so not even doing Rhino, not even doing Illustrator, straight to 3D, and then have a 3D print so we could like put it on as the evaluation versus standing back at the wall and saying, and again, like the variation from thing to thing that you're picking was like literally fractions of millimeters. But when you can put it on, there's not a discussion, either like the pantoscopic angle, which is this tilt, is off, or the head curve, which is sort of this wrap, is off, or the temple length is objectively way too long. Or there's so many things that people didn't understand about what they were designing because they were designing it in 2D, that they would say, oh, well, just lengthen it by 5, or like lengthen it and then change like the temple spread dimensions of like where it touches back here. They didn't fully understand what the implications were. Like if you move a temple bend in a certain way, like, well, as a real product, now it looks really weird just when I look at it. Like it looks like it's like someone broke it almost. And those are the things that super duper mattered to Nike as someone letting us use their brand to make things. And so we had all this sort of infighting in kind of 3 directions about how to get this done. So, but eventually we were able to demonstrate it to people, and that's when they were like, oh, this does work. And probably the biggest thing that changed was that they realized they could do this not just for sort of turbo sport, hyper wrappy type of eyewear, but truly fashionable things as well. Because again, we were able to, in the course of a week, we'd be able to go through enough iterations on a thing and say, final answer, now just go make it. That we were able to get it from 18 down to like 12 months. And then pretty much what I do these days is I do my rough little doodles in my sketchbook. I'm certainly finding inspiration in sort of things that capture the silhouette of what we're generally talking about. and then I hop right into 3D. And sometimes I sculpt things for the cycling project that I've done recently for a pair of glasses. I started out sculpting that in ZBrush, eventually took it to Blender when I needed more control than I could afford myself at the time in ZBrush to make a polygon model. And then I would take it to Rhino if the factory truly needed something more than an STL, usually an STP file. And again, the huge benefit to me is now that I have a 3D model, I can do a real-time visualization in Unreal. I can 3D print it or mill it. Laser cutting is maybe not so important, but sometimes that still happens. And then from a lot of the 3D printed stuff, you can cast things. So again, you can really put something on a table in front of a client and in conjunction with something moving and spinning around and that's interactive, and they're instantly connecting the dots in a way that before we were caught up on like reflections and stuff. We're like, is that actually translucent, or is it, I can't tell what I'm looking at kind of thing, and now like they perfectly get it. So yeah, then that's the desktop VR and the 3D print. So again, the question I'm always asking myself is what deliverable best communicates my design intent? And in most cases, I found that it's not the process that I was working in. That's just how they've been doing it. And in my mind, the way I took it was like they were just waiting on someone to tell them or to suggest another way. Okay, folder structure. How do you guys feel about your laptops right now? Like, are they clean and tidy, or are they not so clean and tidy? Be honest. I see a lot of shaking heads out there. Okay, so everything generally in its place. There are no flawless systems that I've found, but a thing I recommend to all students is the soonest that you can figure out a system for yourself to name and locate files. I've literally been on the phone with that business partner that I had when I was traveling somewhere, and he was freaking out at the office trying to find a file to send to a client. And I walked him through like 15 layers of folder structure because it's always the same. So like a thing is only probably going to be in like one place. And I did a lot more of that work than he did. So like that was just ingrained in me. But I just find that the amount of time that it takes to actually set the system up, like when I'm in the moment of saving out a file or something like that, versus the amount of time when it's crunch time when I need that file, I don't want to get in that crunch time ever. Those are the kinds of things that lead to like sleepless nights when you're looking for final, super duper last final draft, final. It's not it. Let me see if I can find a quick, no. So let's see y'all. Just to go through, I can actually go through. And yeah, the folder structure is something I'm going to send to you guys as well with this presentation and a few other things, just so that you have in mind. If I go to my active projects, and then I just have this template folder, and I just copy it and paste it every time I have a new project. It's maybe 20 megabytes or something like that. Yeah?
Any tips on dealing with keeping organized using multiple hard drives or flash drives? Because I've found that.
Ooh. I'm a cloud guy.
Because you've got versions, and then it's a nightmare.
Yeah, and I can definitely think of different types of projects that are probably more complicated than the ones I'm working on, especially if there are multiple people involved, which was a lot how it was at my first job. There were a lot of people with their hands in the same project, versus when I was doing eyewear, there were many fewer people in that design folder, so you kind of just had the rapport of it, and it worked out. But I pretty much, I have all my stuff on Google Drive. It works fine for now. A friend of mine has more of a private VPN type of thing that he uses that he really likes. But for me, for now, Google works pretty well. A lot of folks are Dropbox folks. But the way I look at it is pretty much everything is either admin, so that's like an NDA, and then the brief, if I get one. A lot of times for me, a brief is really a conversation, and it becomes my job to formalize that and send that back to them so that we can both say, yes, that's what we talked about and what we're probably going to do. The contract I really call it a letter of agreement. It feels a little friendlier. And quotations, requests to factories, like once we've got enough something to send to a factory, that's where some of this stuff goes. So I can keep track of that. And then quotations for production versus for sampling and things like that. And again, you can dig through all this, but the big thing I would say is like, let me find a good example. Oh, yes. So the client I mentioned in Chicago with the building and the architecture, we basically went from, there were 30 versions of that thing. And the first one looks like, kind of nothing. Yeah, there they are. So for me, and even I think back to eyewear projects when I was first really cutting my teeth in eyewear, that very first project, I think we had 45 revisions of that thing because I had no idea what I was doing. And then over time, it starts to reduce and reduce and reduce and reduce. But for me, version numbers are the key. I don't date things. I don't care when. I need to know what the latest one is. I can always go back and look, and there's renderings and stuff to help remind me, but like the date thing doesn't help me. I need to know what version this is. And it's pretty much everything just has a V at the end of it. So this was the client that really liked to do sort of like sub-iterations of things. So that's why there's like the black and the black with the rusty fence and all that kind of stuff. Also, some clients are really particular about their file naming structure. This is definitely not mine because it's all caps. And I wasn't really on underscores and stuff like that at the time. So I don't think I even thought about that when I wrote the establish your process slide. That's another thing that has become problematic at times is sometimes in the course of a project, when you start sending stuff to a factory, a client may want that thing to be named a specific thing that's different than how you've been naming it the whole time. Important to just try to accommodate that as best as you can. And there are certain clients when I work with them or we've been working together long enough that I can use a system that they use and it's totally fine. But I will often suggest, and there's two guys I collaborate with a lot that do eyewear, and they both used to work at Marchand as well, and they're still heavily invested in the date system as revisions, but even on the project we've been working on recently, it's like you start having to put A's and then there's hyphens, and then it's like you start having like sub editions of things and it gets messy really quickly. To me, just a linear system of that as much as possible has always saved my butt. So as best you can, and I'm happy to, again, everybody will have my contact info, so if you have any questions, please just ask. Don't fight through it if you feel like it's a fight. And hopefully I can help. So that's just a quick bit on file naming. That was another thing actually at Marchand that was maybe one of the first times I just stepped out there like, hey, what if we tried this? Is that okay? And everybody was like, no, don't do that. But basically the situation was this. I'm sitting at my desk doing my job. Someone comes over with everything on fire. And they're like, I need the drawing for this frame in my hand. And the problem was the frame in their hand was probably from production, which means it has a name, probably like a person's name, because a lot of these were fashion brands. But when we were working on it, it had like a prototype number. And there was never a process in place for linking those two things in a file somewhere so that you could quickly look up, Sophie is PCRS-19-24 or something like that. So I suggested a pretty minor switch to their revision numbering system and their sort of the client brand naming system that would allow us to like instantly find anything, like you didn't have to be working here when it was designed to figure it out kind of thing. And the pushback I got on that was really intense for about a week and a half, but I went to our VP of design and said, hey, this is the thing that's happening. They're looking at me like I'm crazy, like product development's looking at me like I'm crazy because I can't just like whip it out of nowhere, but there's no reference to it. Like it's not really a realistic thing to ask of someone. And so if we just make this simple change moving forward, we don't have to go backwards with it, but moving forward, then I think that would take a lot of pressure off of the design staff and make the product development staff a lot happier because they can get their things super fast now. And once I proposed it in those terms, she was like, oh, okay. Yes, we will do it. We'll try it. We'll see how it goes. And then slowly, like day by day, by day by day, almost everybody in that office on that floor, there were probably 20 people, or no, probably 25 people in that office on that floor, came over to me and said, "Hey man, thank you." Because it just took all that problem and just completely eviscerated it. And just that little thing, I think, endeared me to like a lot of people. So, and it made everybody's life easier. So I think if you start to see those things, I encourage you to thoughtfully, diplomatically, kindly suggest, not demand or dictate, what if we did this? I think these would be the outcomes and the benefits to these people and those people. Like all this design thinking that we do on a product, we can also do sort of relationally to say how can I make this colleague's life better, or my own life better, or our interaction better, just with a little bit of intention beforehand. So portfolio stuff, to me it's the last step effectively of your design process. So where do most of you guys keep your work if it's online, like to outward facing to potential employers or people that might let you intern? Do you guys have your own websites, or are you using more like kind of super sites like this, or?
Yeah, it's a simple GoDaddy URL that I update through Adobe.
Okay.
It's that shape. Yeah.
I use Behance.
Okay. I found for right now that Behance is working pretty nicely. It's a generally nice setup. I have some models of mine on Sketchfab. Does everybody know Sketchfab? I didn't mention that earlier. It's a place that you can upload a 3D model, throw some materials on it pretty quickly, or you can throw your own textures on it if you've gone through like a substance type of thing. And they look really real. You can spin them around easily on a computer, but also really nicely on a phone. So it's a really nice way to present a model quickly to someone. And that there's something about just at least right now that you can spin it around and interact with it that will set you apart, because it positions you as a more progressive designer probably than the next. Yeah, Sketchfab. And they have like a Sketchfab, I think they call it Creator Studio, which is more of like a configurator type of thing, which is what I've been waiting for forever. Or like, there's another thing that isn't great, or not my favorite, is that there aren't really like material presets. Like if you go back into Keyshot, if you've saved out a library, you just go get those materials again. Not so in Sketchfab yet, at least. So that's kind of one of the limitations. Also, things you can't do are like, you can have animated things in there, but you can't like tell it like play now, or like when the mouse moves here or clicks this, do something. It's more like an animation is just playing kind of thing. So I don't know that it's as useful for that kind of thing. But other places, I think Dribble's cool. Working Not Working, I think fairly recently opened itself up to like whoever wants to apply. It used to be kind of an exclusive. I don't exactly know how you got in before. I have a few friends that basically got into it somehow, and it seemed to be a much tighter network of like people that were looking very specifically for an industrial designer or a graphic designer, and it felt like a very, not elitist, but like a kind of elite level type of folks were in that network, versus now it's much more open. So I've recently thrown some of my work up on there as well. ArtStation tends to be more of the kind of thing for folks that are in like CGI type of things. But I still think it's a really nice presentation format, very similar to Behance, to present your models. And a lot of times you might find that a different type of inquiry comes into you from ArtStation than a place like Coreflot or Behance. So if you're open to it, I think it's worth trying your best to maintain at least a couple of these, because it might help you find people looking for work in different types of industries. So more resources: ArtStation, Blender, Behance. A lot of the markets, like for Unreal and for Blender, there's really cool things that you can find out there, oftentimes for free. I found some really good courses even on Udemy if you dig deep enough. There are cool things there. Another thing I wanted to mention to everyone is that about Unreal, there's an Academy event that happens in South Carolina, I believe, in April-ish. And it's really affordable. It's like $100. And I've not gone, but I have a few friends that have, and they have nothing but epic things to say. It's a bad pun. The company that makes Unreal is called Epic Games. Sorry. It's a really enjoyable learning experience for lots of people that have gone there. So, and also they have a grant program. They just got $100 million in funding that's going to be doled out to people that are doing cool, unusual, unique things with Unreal Engine. So that's another probably pretty meaningful route where you might be able to just find money to develop your own thing through their grant system. And for folks that are, I spelled that wrong, the DeMonte group, sorry, that are back in your SolidWorks reality, there's a company in Chicago called the DeMonte Group, which is D-I, not D-E, sorry about that. They have a bunch of tutorials that are mostly PowerPoint presentations on their website that completely changed how I understood surfacing in a program like SolidWorks. And I spent a lot of time reading through those. And they really actually even helped me understand how I was going to try to do some things in Rhino as well, because it's a similar, the math is the same set of math. Also, Design Engine is another company in Chicago that makes really powerful Creo and Pro-E tutorials and stuff like that. So does everybody remember this guy? Pitted, so pitted? Okay, so this is the stuff I'm like truly stoked about. So there's more stuff with Blender. So just a couple of things that I wanted to show you guys. I know that obviously we're designers, so sketching matters. In Blender, there's something called the grease pencil. And this is this is short, it's like a minute. So you can kind of get a sense of what this person's doing here, again, at hyperspeed, right? So a lot of character stuff. I don't know how much you guys are drawing apparel and things like that. It's never been my game. But again, they're doing all this stuff in 3D, and that's how they're getting these parallax effects to happen. More relevant for us, some car sketching. Excuse me. And then, to me, if I had had some of this stuff when I was in grad school learning, and I took a car studio, this would have been definitely a game changer for me. There's a guy named Scott Robertson that started a site called drawthrough.com years ago that basically everybody that I went to school with learned how to draw from in a serious way. And a lot of these are similar types of principles, except you can really manipulate it in a way that we just couldn't at the time. So that was an exciting one the first time I saw that. I don't sketch a ton with grease pencil just yet. Because again, I haven't really needed to, but the cool thing is that all those strokes and things that you're seeing, those are actually 3D objects. They're curves with like sort of a stroke applied to it. So you can take that stuff to Unreal if you wanted to show someone a model that's good, solid, or it's at a certain place in the process, but you don't want it to look too polished or too realistic just yet. So that's a nice way to loosen up something that's even tighter than it probably needs to be. People always ask me, well, how do you know how big anything is? If it's just polygons or if it's not this thing I'm used to. There's a great add-on that I believe comes pre-installed that's called Measure It. So there's a way to dimension things, so don't worry so much about that. It was definitely one of my biggest concerns because so much of the work that I do is dimensional, even though it may be just for a few key types of dimensions. This add-on has been really, really helpful to me to make sure that I am not modeling something that's the size of the room when it should be the size of a podium and that kind of thing. And the nice thing is it goes, I think it's about halfway here. You can see there's like a layer system and everything with it, so it's not just like a bunch of crap dumped on your model, so you can hide and show all this stuff. I'm not exactly sure that you can export it anywhere. That's another thing I'm trying to figure out is how to get a dimensional item or object into something like Unreal so I can send that to a manufacturer in place of my least favorite, which is a technical drawing. Because again, if I've got a 3D model, why would I make a 2D drawing out of it just so that you can know how big something is or how far apart something is? It doesn't make any sense to me. So definitely a pretty fully functioned dimensioning set that's in there. Mesh Machine, this one for sure blew my mind. This is one of the users that I would say has what is called deep knowledge. He's making like custom interface tools for himself, and you can buy this stuff for sure. It's like maybe a $40 plugin, which is a little pricey, but as you're seeing the stuff that he's doing, you would realize why that is a steal. especially for a package that's free. But a lot of this stuff would be is effectively impossible to do unless this person has made this thing, which again, I'd say a few years ago, I don't know that I could have recommended Blender with the same exuberance that I do now, but because of how you can change things so quickly and recreate forms and change the edge flow of things, it's an exceptionally powerful tool. So yeah, like variable fill, it's like a lot of the things that we're familiar with you can still do. It's just that a lot of this stuff isn't like smoothed and subdivided, but I think again for what we're doing, that may very much not be necessary. Yeah, the unchamfer tool, that's a great one. A lot of these folks have worked really, really hard on figuring out ways to cut things that are pretty straightforward in Rhino or MOI or SolidWorks are the worst news bears in a program like Blender. But I'd say his sort of chamfering tools, like when you're cutting one thing with another thing and then getting like a useful edge there that you can either smooth out or round over. Before this was, I mean, just a nightmare. Just like this would take you all day just to do this one thing, but he's figured out how to get the normals to fix themselves and to how to create easy cutters. And he has a few other plugins. There's one about decals. They're all super duper powerful from a visualization standpoint in particular. So that guy's great. And then this cutting tool, and again, the cutting conversation and Booleaning conversation is a meaningful one because I know that that's a lot of how we think about things. So this is, okay, all the ads. Perfect. So this is a tool called Box Cutter by a guy named Master Xeon 1001. And he made this really cool tool called Box Cutter where you can not only just like cut in sort of simple things, but like you said, the real purpose is anything as a cutter. So you see a pretty simple example. So he's got these sort of like pre-made meshes for like handles and things that cut into things, or like loops and locks and things like that, to something that's more complex. To watch this one. Like the amount of time it would take you to do this otherwise, at least a couple hours, but he just did it in like 2 clicks. So again, that might be more appropriate for something like someone that's doing more environmental work or things that are more rectilinear. But I was doing a project where I needed to cut some text into something, and it just wouldn't, like, or it'd always just leave me errors, or their faces would be missing. And with his tools, it works because of a lot of the math under the hood is taking care of directions of faces and stuff like that for you. Yeah.
I was like, touch Blender, but like the workflow is different. Is it similar tool and like learning wise to anything else?
I would say so. I think the biggest thing for an industrial designer is to not unlearn, but to set aside our current construct of this curve-based, sketch-based type of modeling. That's for sure the biggest thing. And
Call it the new soft skills, knowing 30 different softwares, right?
yeah, and it's like I'm trying to keep it as under control as possible, but it's hard sometimes. And this guy here, his handle is Baptiste G. A lot of his car sculpting tutorials, like you can see, like again, these aren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but like the amount of time it'd take you to build something like that in Rhino or SolidWorks, we're talking certainly the better part of a day, if not a couple days. But again, it's like he doesn't necessarily, I mean, he does work with underlays with some frequency. But then he has some nice videos where, is this the one? Yeah. He sort of starts out from nothing. And you get a real sense of how he's creating creases, and that you can use. The big major worry for me at some point was that I was like, well, how am I going to like precisely sharpen something or curve something? You can lay down a curve and like literally run your brush along that until it's like the tightness that you want it. And if it's a little too tight, you can go back and just smooth it out and move on. It's not about like, oh, it's a 0.4 that goes to a 0.1 and then back up to a No. It's not what we're doing. We're not doing that yet. That's later. It's a sketching tool. So, and again, the speed that you can do this stuff with, it didn't fast forward. I don't think that is the one. But, and all that's to say, like, as you go down the side, you'll see that if you search anything in Blender, you'll see that is just a plethora, an overwhelming plethora of information available. And for me, that's, again, working independently, I don't have someone I can just call for a lot of this stuff. So I got to just go find it. And for me, YouTube has been an epic resource for that. Like, I've pretty much found everything I need to know how to do. Or just if something straight up wasn't possible yet, like, you guys ever have to do like clown renders or in KeyShot, basically the material passes so that you can separate stuff out later, make easier selections in Photoshop?
From my experience, and there's also other types of designers and art people here, but we kind of learned KeyShot like as an after effect, kind of like not specifically like a course on it,
okay,
but as just applying to rendering.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, it's definitely a different way of thinking about it, but I think it offers us so much more flexibility and so much more speed, especially from a shape creation standpoint, a lot more speed once you're more comfortable with the tools, that especially if you're having meaningful pains in the standard tools, I would highly recommend that you give it a look, or just at least watch some videos on it and see what's there. And for me, it's a lot of like watching really simple tutorials and imagining like, what could I do with that? Or it's like a phone cable, curly key, like what am I gonna do with that? And it's not often apparent at the time, but then later I'll be doing something like, oh wait, that one thing. It's like the perfect technique for that. And again, there's so many users using it and so many people making tutorials of various complexity that you will almost certainly find what you're looking for. That's Mesh, that one. This one's a really interesting one. This was another big piece in my head. This guy always types out his stuff. The idea is that basically if you're doing all the sculpting, you've got a lot of polygons. Let's say you've got 200,000 polygons on a shape that's making a car or a boot or whatever. If you want to take that and put that into, actually you can use FreeCAD to translate it from an STL to NURBS. But yeah, it's ugly, and it's slow is the really tough part. So if you can find a way to take this really high poly mesh, let me see where he does it. It's like, yeah, or the slicer will crash on you. So it's a way of taking, no one in here wants to model this thing, right, in SolidWorks, right? Is anybody down? Right, I'm not down for that. So how would you, so again, like you can't, so there's things that you can clearly make with sculpting that you can't make in SolidWorks, right? But if I want to get it to a thing where I can convert it to NURBS, it's got to be less polygons than that. And that's what this add-on called Instant Meshes does. So basically what it does is it takes your mesh and it looks at it and it says, well, what's the most optimal way that I can get it to about, say, 10,000 polygons instead of 200,000? And it works as an add-on and it also works as a standalone. So you might take it to that software and then you can actually kind of like draw on the model to give it some like guidance and some suggestions of like, oh, well, this is a really important detail. I want it to go this way. And again, that's useful for when you say later want to go to, like you wouldn't texture paint with substance. You wouldn't do that on a triangulated mesh because you need it. Does everybody know what a UV map is? For those that don't, it's basically just a translation from a 2D model to a 3D model. It's like taking a surface and unwrapping it, right? So again, that was the thing that was not at all something I learned in school, and it was really hard to get my head around. So this is a tool that, again, it's really no fun to unwrap a triangulated mesh, but to get something that's way fewer polygons and to unwrap that's when Blender is going to have a much easier time doing that. So this was a big key for me too, to really start to think more seriously about the sculpting workflow from like a high poly thing to a lower poly thing that I can either paint on and visualize, or that I can then or automatically retopologize and then send to Rhino with T-splines. to make something usable. So that's that one. And when I send, this link is broken to the sculpting video I wanted to show you. Sorry about that. But it'll be there when I send it to you guys. And then this is the last one I wanted to show, which is about, oh wow, okay. About, I think some of the techniques in this tutorial, this is a Corvette modeling tutorial, goes through a bunch of techniques that are highly relevant to industrial design. So this is again, this is like a CG model, like it's a polygon-based model, not a SolidWorks model or a Rhino model or something like that. And this guy goes, and CG Masters is who produced this. They're a great resource. This tutorial is maybe like $60 or something like that. May sound pricey, but my sense is you're going to learn almost every technique you would ever need from just like pure modeling standpoint, not really sculpting, but a modeling standpoint, you'll learn here to make super crisp, like beautiful reflections. And he goes through the entire materialization process, the lighting, the rendering, and as I recall, you also get how he does the cinematics, like these slow pans and stuff like that too. So again, for me, it's like I'm always trying to make the highest quality deliverable that I can, and this was a big help in trying to figure that out. I know we're getting late on time, so these are some folks that I've found that I'm always watching their videos. I'll have all these links perfectly updated. Unreal Studio, the coolest one I'm going to show you. Okay, here's a real simple one.
It's a video game right?
Mm-hmm. And so basically, so there's Unreal Engine, that's kind of the term many people know. Then there's also Unreal Studio. And what Unreal Studio does, it's the same thing, it's just that it's a different target audience for mostly the same product. It actually has more functionality. It's like kind of stuff added onto it. And it's more for what they would call an enterprise client, which is where we all fall in, which is we're trying to visualize something for someone, create a configurator, change the background, spin it around in real time. So this is one that you can buy, and what immediately went, and the way you program this, or you program all this functionality is not with code, it's with a node graph. So it's like a bunch of boxes and you plug noodles into sockets. It's like a visual programming language as opposed to like a text-based one, which is how Unity works. And that was when I punted on Unity. I was like, well, I don't have time to learn to code. No, thank you, not interested. But when I realized that Unity had this visual programming approach, that was when I got really excited because I already do some notable things for materials in Blender. And so you just have to kind of learn what the functions are. So I'm going to be working on trying to create something that would be easy for everybody to use, where it would feel kind of like Keyshot, like, oh, I can just drop a model in, and if I put it in this bucket, now it knows that that's the thing to change the color on, or that's where I can create a slider for things. So that's that one. And I mean, you can go pretty nuts with this stuff. So something on kind of the other end of the spectrum, but would have been really helpful for me when I was doing that architecture project with the 30 revisions, where we started off doing 6 angles of this building at, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes a pop, to like 16 angles that he wanted to see the thing. And then but then there's like 4 versions, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't make sense at a certain point. So this isn't real, this is all generated stuff, and they're particle effects to help the leaves move, and that control things like the lighting and the environment. So when I saw this one, I was really inspired to try to think more about how I could use it for architectural things as well, which is a big market for them is architectural visualization for sure. Let me see.
Is that your website there, or is that part of the presentation?
No, this is all the presentation. And there, again, the grants, there's a link to the grants, a couple other configurators and cinematics. Another thing is, even if you don't make something that's fully interactive that they can just spin around, you can just set up like preset animations so they can watch it do this and then come up and over and down, which I think is, again, a much more emotional way to tell a story about a product than just still renders. And again, the amount of time that like Keyshot takes a second to do its thing, right? This does too, but it does it kind of all at once, and then you can kind of do whatever. Like once it's sort of captured all the lighting is the best way to say it, then you can go hog wild in there and change stuff and move it all around because it's all happening sort of underneath all that shading that KeyShot's having to calculate from every angle. So again, it's just a different approach, but I think it's just as powerful and almost certainly faster and more enjoyable. And some future things I'm working on. I'm working on a thing called Unsolicited, where basically I find cool stuff that people have made or designed or illustrated very often, and I've direct messaged people like, hey, is it cool if I make a model of that? And they're like, yes, please do that. I don't know how to do that at all. So that's a way I've been thinking about establishing partnerships, is again, bringing value to someone that hasn't even thought about making a 3D model of something that they drew. With Nixon, I have some eyewear ideas that I have to present to them. And to me, it's like I feel like it's my duty to show people cool things that their brand could be doing that they're not doing. So that's where a lot of these ideas come from. Brand Jordan is this weird thing for me that I kind of like, but I also think is way off the mark. But I think I could show them some cool stuff about eyewear that would work with this little sub-brand within Brand Jordan that they have. And once upon a time, I would have been like way too scared to even think about that. But now I'm like, no, I can see it. I can see it clearly. I just have to show it to them. So that's the stuff I'm excited about moving forward. Some collectible stuff I'm working on. Basically, it's like a chocolate bar project that's based on the Harriet Tubman $20 bill. That seems like it's never ever going to come out. Again, I felt like I could help stimulate conversation around that in a way that was fresh and new for people. Also working on sort of fake championship rings for things. Because again, I think there's a way of looking at pop culture and the way that people identify and connect to things that will get them really excited about it, make them want to like just have this thing. So that's collectibles, organizational things. Looking at a lot more eyewear and jewelry projects for organizations, because what occurred to me is that when you're in an organization, you've got a very focused target market that a lot of, and particularly the Greek folks, they will just buy a thing because it has like the letters on it, let's say. But for me, it's like, it's not just a cash grab. I'm looking at it like, I want to make these brands, these things that are I'm not in any Greek organizations, but I know for people that are, it's a meaningful thing. But tragically to me, no one's ever tried to make a legit brand out of any of those in a product kind of way. So like if you've ever seen Greek glasses, like they're kind of like party, like kind of junk, like I don't care if I break them kind of things. No one's made a really nice pair to capture this thing that they really care about, which strikes me immediately as very strange. So that's more how my brain is working, as I'm looking forward to take these skills like with eyewear and jewelry to try to put them in a place where they haven't really played so much before. Last one is working with kids. I was saying to Max earlier, the cool thing about working with kids is that, and even as a student, you don't have to be an expert because they don't know any of this stuff, right? So anything you can share with them is going to be probably pretty interesting. So I feel like I can make something out of that and give something back in the same way that, my mom taught me to bake, and that led me down this whole other path I don't know that I ever would have necessarily come upon. So, and I think you guys can all appreciate that, like, not too many people know what ID is. And I think it's all of our duty to help people understand what it is and to help people become interested in it. So that's a big part of the reason why I want to work with kids. No time for the demo, but the care package will evolve of like an NDA, a letter of agreement, just some basic stuff to help provide a little bit of structure for you if you're trying to work independently, even now. You can email Max, or he'll send that out to everybody, and I hope that gets you started on your journey. And I think I'm going to wrap it up there because I'm over time. Thank you.